Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are
hangingontohope.org. This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given.
When I was a stay-at-home mom, I actually started an organization in Kenya. This is crazy, but it's an NGO called Every Child is a Gem. And what we did was we actually helped orphans and widows in the nation. One of our orphans actually got sold into slavery, and we had to go save her. And she had been sold to Saudi Arabia and put on a plane over there. And so I had to buy her back. So I had to raise the money, buy her back. And her experience was just unbelievable, the abuse that she has been through. I know that's totally left, but that's just who I am. Like, I do a lot of diverse things, and that's just part of my story of what I did when I was a stay-at-home mom, because I wanted to still help others.
Yeah. Wow, I couldn't even function when I was a stay-at-home mom.
Well, you were being physically abused. I had someone who was absent all the time, traveling, workaholic, and sex addict. So he was gone all the time. So it's just me and the kids.
Yeah. Plus I had to work full time, and pretty much that sounds like something we could make a movie about.
Oh, getting her back, Monica.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I went to visit her after she got back. I mean, it was so scary because so that was when Skype just kind of came out. And all of a sudden I started getting Skype calls. So she would call me and she's like, I'm running down the street. And I was like, what? She's like, yes, they're chasing me. And then she got put in a jail over there where they go to court as women and they're like half dressed and there's blood on the floor because the person before them was convicted. I mean, the abuse of women is so bad in Saudi Arabia. It's horrible.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so she was telling of the stories. It was just terrible.
It is horrible. That's why the more countries we reach, the more people we reach, the better. And to hear the feedback, starting to get more feedback and knowing, because as soon as you just want to give up and be like, you get somebody that you get someone else reaches out and shows you how you help them. And you're like, okay, this is God. We got to keep going.
Yeah,
I know.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Brenda J. Today, we have Lori Jones on the podcast. Lori is a licensed professional counselor at Inspired Counseling. She has worked in the counseling field for over 20 years, helping individuals get free from addictions, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, PTSD, and healing marriages. Lori has extensive training in EMDR and trauma therapy to help individuals find the root of their problems. She is also an abuse survivor. Welcome to the show, Lori.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Karen and Brenda. I'm really honored to be here.
Yes, we're so glad that you're here.
Yes, we are.
Yes. I already introduced myself. This is Karen. So can you tell a little of your abuse story and how it led up to you becoming a trauma therapist?
Absolutely. So I grew up in a pretty middle-class family. My father was a workaholic. Both of my grandparents were alcoholics. So both of my parents learned the alcoholic family systems: don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. So that impacted me as being the grandchild of that environment. And my dad just went into his addiction of workaholism. I felt like performance driven. I never felt like there was enough. My mom was having a lot of depression. I ended up in a lot of like trauma with her and drama triangles with my mom, trying to kind of like a parental inversion with her. So I became the parent to help her. And thus, then later became a counselor, not to blame it on my mom in any way, but that was a part of my story, is helping my mom also and standing up to my dad. So I became like that substitute mate parental inversion triangle as a child. Then I went into drugs and alcohol at a pretty young age, became an alcoholic rather quickly because I don't do anything half measures. I went to the extreme. I actually went through alcohol and drug treatment when I was 18 years old, which is amazing and a miracle. And I've been clean and sober since 1985.
Wow.
So
Great.
yeah. So my addiction started in my childhood because I didn't feel seen or heard. And the wounding of the parent not being there for me, my father, left a big daddy wound in me and thus set me up for a cycle of dysfunction in marriages. So that was my story then. And then I've been in recovery for this many years. I still go to meetings. I still work an active program. Then I went to school to become a master's level therapist when I was like 25 years old. And I got my license. Then I got saved and started believing in Jesus at that point. And I started searching different Christian type therapies. And I went through a Christian therapy school called Elijah House Ministries. And I completed that ministry in 2 years. It was 2 years every Saturday. It's like a lay counselor's type program, but it really taught me more than my actual master's degree.
Wow.
I gotta say. Yeah, it was really interesting because it was biblical counseling. Sorry.
That's great. I've heard of them before.
Mm-hmm. Have you? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So John and Paula Sanford, I got to meet them several times. And over the 2 years, we ourselves had to go through trauma healing ourselves to become Elijah House ministers. So it was great. I loved it. So I learned more there. Then I ended up in a marriage, and my marriage, it was successful for a little while. And one reason I didn't leave that marriage for so long was because I felt like I needed to stay because I was married and I made that commitment. Even though I knew something was wrong, I just kept staying and I kept putting him on prayer lists, praying for him, hoping and thinking it would get better. And, it really led us all into a lot of spiraling and a lot of dysfunction.
Yeah, that's very common, I think, especially in the Christian realm, because you kind of feel like you don't have that option because it's not talked. That's why we want to talk about it more.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, to me, I ended up with a man that had a porn addiction, which later evolved into actual affairs. And I was in recovery. I didn't know it was happening, or I sort of like went away or went asleep, dissociated, and didn't pay attention to the signs and the red flags. And, I ended up having a lot of betrayal from that marriage. And we were married for 18 years. So it really set the stage of like, I needed a lot of healing after that. Even though I had healing before, healing is a journey. We're never perfect. We're always learning.
Right. Exactly.
So that's my story. And that came crashing down. Really, the Holy Spirit guided me and led me to, I wasn't the snooper and the person who looked through phones and all that kind of stuff. So I honestly just thought he was working all the time, just like my father had, and that he was just the absent husband. But one day in my morning meditation, I guess I heard an audible voice, but I heard a voice saying, look here. And I looked and I was like, wow, it was like a whole divorce plan, like how he was going to divorce me and how he had been planning this. So I didn't understand why. So I kind of followed him around and I snooped around trying to figure it out. And that's when I figured out he was having affairs on me for many years. And so that came crashing down and we ended up getting divorced, have 3 beautiful, lovely children. And the children really suffered a lot during the divorce. And it's been almost 9 years now. So I'm pretty much on the healing end of it. After 4 to 5 years, I started to date again and trust again. And I ended up getting married. And now I'm in a marriage of 4 years at this point in time. So, and I'm still, in recovery from a lot of things. Like, marriage is not perfect and my life is not perfect, even though I'm a therapist. I'm still learning, and as we all are. So that's my story, but I feel reasonably happy and I have joy in my life and I can set boundaries and I'm not stuck in these unhealthy patterns. Or if I see them, I can say something and speak up. I don't get stuck anymore like I did before in the past.
Yeah.
Wow. So you say that you're still healing while you're in that marriage. So it's pretty important to have a man that's healthy and that understands and can understand what you're going through and be supportive of that. So I'm glad you were able to find that.
Yeah. And the person doesn't have to be perfect or, like imperfect, because as long as I know how to set boundaries and am healthy, then I can have that in my environment around me. Does that make sense? So I can set boundaries around things. Even in a marriage, it's okay and healthy to set boundaries, that you can be healthy even if you're not with someone that's healthy all the time, that you can have friends and surround yourself with health. And I mean, I'm not saying abuse, like you guys obviously out of an abusive situation, but someone that no one is perfect in a marriage, and there is going to be drama, and we have 7 kids between us. So he has 4 and I have 3. And so there's a lot of complexities in our lives.
Yeah, I could tell you.
Oh my God.
Just to say that. Yeah. So, I mean, things are not perfect and it's okay. And most of the time we're moving in the same direction and have the same goals.
That's good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I also like when I first met you, you talked about just how important it is to have the spiritual aspect to healing. And I realized that after I got out of my abusive marriage, that I was kind of mad at God for a couple of years, and I really just kind of stalled until my relationship with God just got better. That's when I started to heal. Like my soul wasn't able to heal until that point. So yeah. I do love that you do that. So how do you incorporate like the spiritual realm into your therapy sessions? I'm just curious.
Well, yeah, the spirit is really at the core. So the body, the mind is being healed, the body, and then the spirit as well. So if we don't feel connected to God and have that spiritual connection, the mind can get healed, but it's really not in the heart. Like you don't really feel it. Mm-hmm. So we're working on getting that connection, that 18 inches down into the heart, to where we actually feel safe. We feel secure. We know that we're able to protect ourselves and take care of ourselves. And then also we know that Abba Father, our God, is behind us and protecting us and defending us and loves us and wants the best for us. And so that really inner child healing, after the body processes, there's that last layer of really like encompassing that inner child with like kind of like a warm blanket of security, to where they really feel like they can heal in that, and they feel just loved and totally whole again.
I can see how the spiritual, because I feel the same way, like the spiritual part was such an important part of my healing too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So today we were going to talk about EMDR therapy. We haven't talked too much on this yet. So we know you specialize in EMDR therapy. Can you explain what EMDR is and why it's necessary when the brain has trauma?
Yeah, for sure. So EMDR, it was developed in 1987 by a psychologist, Dr. Francine Shapiro. And what she noticed is that eye movements can actually change the brain reactions. Because if someone has a trauma trigger, it's like the tiger is in the room, like Peter Levine says. So it's like we literally have this trauma reaction where the whole brain is misfiring. So like if somebody hears, like, let's just use a war veteran, for example, if they hear the backfiring of a car, instantly their whole body feels like they're in the war again, because they have that whole body physical reaction. So EMDR it stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So we're basically reprocessing the traumatic event. And there's top-down therapies and there's bottom-up therapies. And EMDR is a bottom-up therapy. So it's like the body is the memory. And what we do is we use kind of a fruit-to-root type therapy. And I'm using that language is more from Elijah House Ministry. But I don't try to dig up a lot of trauma, but things that are traumatic in their current lifestyle. If there's a bad fruit happening, we know to kind of go down that train of thinking and that negative cognition, like where did they get that negative cognition from? And so the memory leads them right to the place in the brain where it is. And you would be surprised at how fast it works. That's the thing I love about EMDR is it is a very, very effective type of therapy. So I went through this type of therapy 6 years ago myself, and also I got trained in it. And it has been so effective. I have dealt with individuals that have the most severe complex trauma, and they're significantly better in 3 to 5 sessions.
Wow.
That is
I know. And if it's somebody with a single event or like big T traumas, specific big T traumas, we're able to get through those really quickly as well. Now, if we have someone with complex, significant attachment type trauma where they have years and years and years and years and years of trauma, it might take a little, yeah, exactly. And it'll take longer, but you're going to move through it a lot faster. And it's kind of like a clogged drain. Once some of the big traumas are out, it's going to clear out the rest of the smaller debris.
Yeah, that's what I did. I dealt with like 5 of the biggest ones, I think. And then it helped so much. Like it did work. I couldn't figure out how it worked, but it worked. So
I know. I know. Yeah. And so it's like our left and right brain, the parts of our brain. So when we think of that trigger or nightmare, or we're having intrusive thoughts, the whole brain starts to misfire. And they actually have done a lot of brain scans of before and after EMDR. So before EMDR, when you think of that intrusive thought, the whole brain starts turning red. And you can see it in the frontal lobe, which affects your executive functioning all the way through the entire brain, the parasympathetic, the sympathetic nervous system, all the different parts of the polyvagal system. And it literally fires everything up to where that individual can't think. They react in an angry or fearful flight, fight, freeze, fawn. And so the individual, no wonder they're stuck in that traumatic or abusive environment. And that's what I mean by we're able to set boundaries now and be healthy because we're not in freeze anymore to where we can't move.
So they're not in like react mode after they've had some sessions.
Yep.
Very interesting. I've only had it done a couple of times. I remember the first time thinking like, this is weird. Like, how is this helping? But I definitely felt like there was improvement too. So I believe in it. So can you educate our listeners by explaining the different types? I didn't even realize there was different types of EMDR.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah, so you can use your fingers like to go across the screen. People can do it with remote. I prefer face-to-face for trauma therapy, just in case I need to be present for someone if they need me to be there, if they have a regression or something. There also is a light bar. I use a light bar or I use my fingers. There's also audio beeps that go back and forth between the two sides of the brain. And how this is working is you're actually thinking of the memory. You're looking at the light. So you're in the room present. We're not dissociated. I do work with people and individuals who are dissociated slightly, but I'm not dealing with someone that's not present in the room to where they're in their memory completely. So they're in their memory and they're in the room and they're processing at the same time. So there are 8 phases of EMDR. And really the first phase is just taking history. So we're just meeting together. We're starting to take all their client history and their negative cognitions. And I usually look at like their present life and talk with them about their present issues that they're having, because we want to make a change of something that's going to impact their present life. So that's what we do in our first session. And then we start doing preparation session, which is phase 2. And phase 2, we're really creating a safe space for them in the therapy office and the rapport with the clinician. We're also creating like a box or a container or a scent, which will ground them and get them back in the room just in case they go into that memory too far. So this gets us ready.
Okay. So you also mentioned that DBTs need to be addressed before you can do EMDR therapy. What is DBT therapy, and can you expound on the importance of it?
Yeah. So dialectical behavioral therapy is DBT therapy. And I work with individuals that have a lot of severe trauma, addictions, borderline personality disorder, or who come from like severe abuse situations. So those individuals might have a hard time regulating. So DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, is something that I use in conjunction with EMDR. And the reason I use it is because it helps them with emotional regulation. So like, for instance, if you fly off the handle, if you yell about things or get really afraid, it helps you to regulate and to stay present in your body. So that's what dialectical behavior is. 36 skills. It's emotional regulation, interpersonal effectiveness, which teaches us how to actually describe situations that we're observing, how to share our feelings, and how to ask for our needs. So it has very specific standards on how to ask for your needs instead of like screaming out what you need. Because most abuse victims will, or individuals who have been severely traumatized, they did not learn how to ask for their needs in a healthy way. So that's what that second part is. It also teaches them how to regulate in a crisis situation. And there's like crisis survival skills with it, and also mindfulness. And mindfulness is when I like to bring in like some of the Bible, some of the things that we learn, in scripture, instead of all the Eastern beliefs as much. So I'm using more, it depends on the individual. If the client wants to use Eastern religion, they can. I'm open to anybody. I actually have a following of individuals from the yoga community for some reason. So whatever they want to bring into it, whatever spiritual practice. But as far as Christian goes, like what I do is I'll ground it in the word during that mindfulness technique. So that's what we do in phase 2 of EMDR is our preparation. If somebody is having a lot of trouble regulating in their personal life, it could take 9 months to get through this whole part of it.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like if somebody is harming themselves or cutting or suicidal or dysregulated all the time in their life, and they're just racing around and unable to be grounded, it could take longer.
And so the DBTs, you were saying that even abuse victims have anger and don't know how to, because I feel like I just kind of always still feel like I walk around on eggshells and take the more freeze position. But you're saying some people do the opposite. And so you have to work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you first start, you might swing like a pendulum from freeze to just like attack mode. But I applaud that because at least you're moving, Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah. And then you can learn to come and regulate in the middle and say what you mean, but don't say it mean in a healthy way.
Oh, say what you mean, but don't say it mean in a healthy way. That's good.
I know.
I
know. I didn't make that up. That's from Al-Anon. But I use a lot of tricks from the program and things I've learned along the way, obviously.
What are some other tricks? Any other good little tricks? I love that.
Yeah.
To be continued. Stay tuned for next week's part 2 of EMDR therapy with Lori Jones. You don't want to miss it.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening, and until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.